Judgment has been reserved in the State Capture Commission's contempt of court case against the former president Jacob Zuma. Advocate Thembeka Ngubeni, on behalf of the inquiry, argued that the matter is not about the former president not wanting to appear before the commission, but rather about him defying a ruling of the Constitutional Court. He says that Zuma's actions undermined the administration of the rule of law. In January, the court ordered Zuma to give evidence before the inquiry chaired by the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Senior counsel for the Commission, Advocate Thembeka Ngubeni, says the former president's status should not absolve him from abiding by the law. Ngubeni further argued that there are provisions in the Constitution to deal with Zuma's defiance of the court.
Our constitutional system provides an answer to what has transpired, even though what has transpired is unprecedented. The legal system contains an answer to it. A person who has intentionally disobeyed a court order is guilty of a crime known as contempt of court. Mr. Zuma is no exception. His status as former president does not protect him from the law. The elements of a contempt of court crime are clear and well established in our law. In this case, we will submit that they have been amply established. 1, Mr. Zuma knew of the order against him. 2, Mr. Zuma failed to comply. 3, Mr. Zuma acted in a mala fide and intentional manner. And 4, Mr. Zuma has failed to file papers to explain his mala fide disobedience. The Commission has asked for a declaration that Mr. Zuma is guilty of contempt. It has also asked for a penalty of 2 years imprisonment. It has not asked for a fine, nor has it asked for a suspended sentence.
Ngubeni also accused the former president of deliberately trying to avoid responsibility.
His conduct must be seen for what it is. We are dealing with a cynical maneuver to avoid accountability. Mr. Zuma has engineered a situation in our submission quite deliberately to escape accountability. The court will remember its own remarks at paragraph 69 of the judgment and paragraph 70, which the court will find at page 78 of the record. And this is what the court concluded in the context of direct access. The respondent, that is Mr. Zuma, is firmly placed at the center of those investigations, which include an allegation that he had surrendered constitutional powers to unelected private individuals. If those allegations are true, his conduct would constitute a subversion of this country's constitutional order. Paragraph 70. It must be plainly stated that the allegations investigated by the Commission are extremely serious. If established, they would constitute a huge threat to our nascent and fledgling democracy. It is in the interest of all South Africans, the respondent included, that these allegations are put to rest once and for all. In the way that Mr. Zuma has conducted himself in response to the judgment by this court, in response to the summons issued by Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, he has displayed a cynical attitude to accountability.
Now, to help us better understand the political implications of this case, we're joined now by Professor Ivor Sarakinsky of the Wits School of Governance. Professor, thank you for your time this afternoon. Now, as a lead up to what we saw transpiring at the Con Court during the early parts of today, we saw a number of political figures, men of influence, going to visit the former president Jacob Zuma in Uganda, trying to convince him to go and attend to this particular issue as far as the Deputy Chief Justice and the Commission of Inquiry is concerned. As far as where we are right now, with the Con Court imminently going to be delivering their decision as to what the judgment will be. What are the political ramifications of where we are right now?
There are many. At one level, it's about factional politics within the ruling party and groupings aligning themselves with factions in the governing party to gain influence in terms of ensuring that there's a change of leadership in the governing party. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is to, as the senior counsel said, circumvent accountability by not appearing in public. And part of that strategy is to appear as the victim to supporters in terms of ending up possibly in prison, and to try and politicize the imprisonment to say that it's a political maneuver on behalf of those who lead the governing party at the moment. And in that way to kind of mobilize support in the broader context of deep divisions within the governing party. And a final political aspect of this is there's a low...
Unfortunately, as you can see, we lost our Skype connection there with the professor, but we certainly will try and get him back so we can unpack what the political ramifications of the former president possibly going to jail, what that would mean for the country as well as the country's political dynamics. That's Professor Ivor Sarakinsky there. Looks like we've got our connection reestablished with the professor. Professor, good to have you back again. You were still breaking down the possible ramifications of this. You were talking about the impact of a potential imprisonment.
Yes. So I don't know where you heard me last, appearing to be the victim of a plot from within the governing party and to mobilize support around that. And then I was talking about a third aspect, which is about public trust in the criminal justice system. And it's at a low ebb at the moment in terms of a lack of action at a range of levels in terms of criminality. And if politically important people escape justice, that will further undermine the rule of law, and that will open up a can of worms in terms of political behavior in South Africa.
So let's break those three aspects that you've just highlighted down and perhaps start with the change of leadership within the governing party. If, as you say, this is part of a strategy for a change of leadership, who then, and this may sound like an obvious question, but I think it's important for us to break it down, who then would be next in line for leadership within the African National Congress? Should that be part of a ploy to destabilize the leadership internally?
Well, that's all part of or connected to the RET document, which was recently made public, and the publicization of possible slates for the 2022 electoral conference, with the current SG heading the slate as president of the ANC. So I think those bits of information that have come into the public domain give us a sense of what the thinking is behind the scenes in terms of factional mobilization.
The second aspect that you highlighted is the former president positioning himself as one who is a victim. I ask, to what end? What would be the benefits of that?
To get public sympathy and to mobilize support against the current leadership in claiming that it's all a plot. And there's a long history of plots in terms of trying to compete for positions of power in the ANC. Thabo Mbeki did it in terms of a plot to oust him, to consolidate his support. So there is a track record there of using this ploy to win support. So you present yourself as a victim, you try and win public sympathy, you bolster your support, which increases your bargaining power and increases the prospects of your faction winning delegates' votes at the electoral conference. So it's a political mobilization strategy.
And the third aspect that you highlighted there was focusing on the criminal justice system and undermining that, or pointing a spotlight or shining the spotlight on the fact that it is not credible. To what end, once again?
Well, if you can undermine the rule of law, it means that you can dismiss the judgments made by courts of law. And there are a number of very high-profile cases already in front of the courts on corruption matters related to state capture. And the whole idea here is to weaken the legitimacy of the courts to pronounce on these matters in order to make a case that the conspiracy in terms of ganging up against certain individuals is underway and is embedded in the courts as well. Now, if you undermine the credibility of the courts in that way, you basically ensure that there's lawlessness, because there's no authority then to make sure that the law is in place and everyone is equal before the law, and you undermine that in terms of your politicization of the courts. You try and create a political solution to your criminal problems. And the implications of this are very, very severe in terms of ensuring that there's basic law-abiding citizen behavior going forward from this.
So are you saying that there is a likelihood that the former president is, in this particular case, positioning himself as a martyr for a greater cause of being absolved, first of all, from the other criminal charges that he faces and the cases there that are ongoing and still outstanding, and secondly, as a martyr in reestablishing a foothold of his quote-unquote faction within the African National Congress?
Well, the former state president has presented himself as a master chess player. And if there's an element of truth in that, then there would be an element of thinking ahead in terms of strategic moves, in terms of how to structure the game to your advantage, in terms of getting to the end game of his political troubles. So in that sense, I think that the martyr strategy is part of an ongoing attempt by the former president and his allies to circumvent accountability. So I think that it's one part of a broader strategy, and mobilizing within the ANC factional battles, weakening individuals who are seen as anti the former president and that grouping is also part of the strategy as well.
Should that indeed be the case, Professor, a political chess game that is being played, is there any potential of this backfiring? And if so, how could it?
It can backfire in one important way, in my view, and that is that the martyrdom strategy doesn't work, and the former president and his allies fail to mobilize sufficient support to show that they have credible support and credibility within the ruling party. So it could backfire in that it exposes the weakness of their position. Now, we don't know how strong the factions are. We don't know how strong the support is for the former president. And that's why this is endgame. Both sides are going to find out pretty soon how strong and weak their positions are within the ANC. And unfortunately, the collateral damage of that battle is the justice system, the criminal justice system, and the rule of law in South Africa.
Professor, thank you very much for your analysis this afternoon. That's Professor Ivor Sarakinsky of the Wits School of Governance on the political ramifications should indeed the former president be found guilty of contravening the constitutional court and going against the highest court in the land.